Today we're going to be talking quickly about critical reading, um, what it is and the ways that we can connect it to our own rhetorical processes as we seek to read and create persuasive arguments. We're going to start with this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said that one must be an inventor to read well. There is then creative reading as well as creative writing. We're going to come back to this idea as we go through this presentation. So to begin with, this idea of critical reading. Our textbook says that reading critically involves actively trying to understand what is being said while applying one's own previous knowledge and experiences. In other words, it means that a reader must balance what is being said with both how it is being said and what assumptions the reader brings to the table. As active, critical readers, we all have the job of simultaneously understanding, interpreting, and analyzing a text. So what does this mean? In a nutshell, it means that the reading process itself is what generates meaning. There's only so much that words on a page can do. Whenever we read a text or engage with a text, we're bringing our own sets of assumptions, our own experiences with the topic, our own experiences with the author, and so forth into play. And that all gets brought in as part of the reading process. And so in many ways, what we're reading is not only the text itself, but all of these contextual ideas that we have brought to the table. So in a way, what we're doing is a form of writing process while we are reading. We're creating a new text just by reading it, because we're fusing that text that the author gives us with all of these assumptions and experiences that we bring to the table. So, some questions to ask yourself as you engage in the critical reading process. First, we start out with a couple of questions, a series of questions about the author and the text itself. So start out by asking ourselves what the author is saying. What is the argument that they're making here? How do you know that this is what they are saying? What kinds of images, what kinds of language, what types of evidence are they using? What exactly is being argued? What supporting points or evidence are working within this text? And then what is the context for this argument? What are the larger conversations going on around this argument? So that first set of questions is a series of questions to ask yourself about the author and about the text itself. The last two questions, I think, are equally important because they have to do with keeping you as an individual in the picture of, as you engage in the critical reading process. Because critical reading is an expression of you, of your own experiences leading up to this moment, and your own experience with the text that you're looking at. So first ask yourself, does this text work for me? Does it work on a rhetorical level? Does it work on a persuasive level? Does it work on an aesthetic level? Is it pleasing to read? And think about why that is. And then finally ask yourself, where have I seen arguments like this before? This last question will help you to focus in on how you are connected to the context of this piece, where you have seen things that are similar, and where what you could reflect on in your own experience and your own reading to bring more expertise to this discussion. So why do we talk about the how? Well, a large part of reading a text critically not only is about what the author is saying, but also how they are saying it. What types of language are they using? What images are they using? What types of allusions are they using? What types of experiences are they bringing in from their own lives? Um, all of those things together help to bolster or, if not done effectively, undercut the kind of the literal argument that they're trying to make. So, for instance, understanding how authors are making their point, what types of language, what images and allusions they're using, helps us to understand things like who the intended audience is, and what assumptions the author makes about this audience, as well as giving us insights into what rhetorical strategies the author is deploying. So this enables us to view the text on multiple levels and to make better judgments about the overall effectiveness of the text at accomplishing its goals. So one of the things to think about in terms of this is that if you have somebody, you run into somebody on the street corner who is screaming at you something about politics, who is yelling at the top of their lungs, who takes off his shoes and throws them at you, no matter what point that author of that text has, the crazy person on the street, no matter what validity their point has, it's not going to be effective because they are not meeting the necessities of the rhetorical situation. We are, instead of judging just what they're saying, we're judging how they are saying it. So some starting places to look at with how authors are saying things. Starting with the rhetorical triangle, thinking about who the speaker or rhetor is, who the intended audience is, what the author is saying, and what the context of this text is. All of these things will influence the types of language, will influence the types of images and allusions that the author is using. So and then thinking about the rhetorical appeals, which we'll talk about in another video. How are ethos or credibility, pathos or emotion, and logos or logic being used? And then looking at word choice, style, and looking for what is not being said. What does the author's word choice or style reveal about them? Does it reveal any biases? Does the author use, flowy, flourishing adjectives talking about one side of an argument and very plain adjectives talking about another? What is not being said? What is the impact of information that's being left out? What does the information that's omitted tell us about the author and what they're trying to persuade us of? So the last couple of points on that slide about critical reading were about you as a reader, you in particular as a reader. So I think it's really important for us to keep ourselves in the picture, to check in with ourselves as individuals as we read, and make note of the reactions that we are having while we are reading. So, do you buy the author's argument? Do you think it's true? Do you think it's a load of BS? Do you think that the author doesn't give you enough information to make a decision? Are you emotionally impacted by this? Does the argument or the way the author is using language or images, does that disgust you? Do you find it engaging? Does it leave you kind of blah with kind of a non-emotional connection? How does this connect to past experiences or readings that you have done? So what is your experience with this subject, with this author, with this type of language? And how can you kind of bring that as baggage into your reading process? What information do you already have? What assumptions do you already have? What biases do you already have? And then thinking about the context of your reading and how that can give some information. Um, for instance, if we're reading an essay in this class in particular, English 101, part of our main focus is on rhetoric. So if we're reading a piece, one of the things that you know already that you're going to be looking out for is an idea of rhetoric and argumentation in the piece. You know that walking into it. Might not be kind of consciously aware of it, but because you already know the context of the reading, you already know what you're looking for in the text. So some steps as suggested in our textbook for critical reading. Take notes, reread, summarize, reflect and respond, contextualize, and evaluate. So in terms of understanding what is being said, in terms of understanding literally what is being said, some kind of tips. Look up words that you don't know, and look for both connotative and denotative meanings. Denotative meaning being basically the dictionary definition. If you were to look up the word in Webster's or OED or something like that, this is the definition you would get. And the connotative meanings are the ways that meaning is connected to context and experience. What are the cultural meanings of these words? So read it more than once if you're having trouble with it. Find the author's central argument or idea and take notes. One of the things that I suggest is that when you find what the author is saying, what you think that their argument is highlight it or star it. That way you can always come back to it. So something else that we can do in terms of critical reading is to summarize. So to take the author's arguments and then to put it in our words. So in terms of what we want to have in our summaries of an author's piece are what are their arguments, what is their evidence, and then how this author connects their argument to a larger discussion. So looking at the context, thinking about who the author is, what biases they have, doing a little bit of research and seeing what else they've written, where they come from, what the author is directly responding to. Are they kind of writing in response to another piece or another text? And then again, thinking about the idea of where you're reading the text. The last part that I think of critical reading is response. This might be something that you don't really think about, but in the process of writing, you're already responding to it. If we look at that quote from Emerson at the beginning about reading being a process of invention, it being creative reading as well as creative writing. That's rooted in this idea that as people, we make judgments and we make connections while we are reading something. So the response is it's already going on by the time we finish reading a piece. So in terms of writing a response to a piece that we're reading, we just need to formalize the process that's kind of going on subliminally. So thinking about how everything that you've considered so far about what the author is saying, how they're saying it, the way that we are, what our reactions to, how that fuels a response. What particular things do we want to focus on in terms of our responses? And then how can we be mindful in the same way that the author of the text is mindful of the audience, of the discussion, um, of the previous points that have come before? Um, how can we be mindful of that as we construct our pieces? Um, thank you.